Welcome back to the Skinfluence Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Dustin Portela. Today we're going to be talking all about SPF is your bae. And I'm, as always, joined by my co-host, Austin.
Hi, happy to be here, working with Dr. Portela every day, side by side, the dynamic duo. Mm-hmm. What are you taking over there?
These are the Inner Glow Soul Defense Gummies.
Oh, what's that?
So these are one of many supplements that you can get over the counter that have something in them called Polypodium leucotomus. It's an extract from a fern, like an antioxidant. And when you take it, about 30 minutes before you're going to be in the sun, it acts in such a way to help you prevent sunburn and damage from the sun.
Interesting.
And so I devour these kinds of things over the course of the summer when I'm out with my kids.
Yeah.
I put them to the ultimate test with a different brand called Heliocare, and this is not recommended. And now, just know that polypodium is not a substitute for sunscreen. However, I wanted to know how well these things worked. I was in Scottsdale, Arizona with my wife.
Oh, okay.
And I put sunscreen on my face and on my arms. Intentionally did not put any on my white chest.
Okay.
And
you really put it to the chest.
And I took like 6 or 8 of the Heliocare.
Yeah.
And I laid in a pool floaty in the sun for an hour, and I did not burn.
No kidding.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
So
I was a believer at that point, and I've recommended them ever since. Inner Glow Vitamins is formulated by a dermatologist. They're gummies. They taste amazing. You should take that one home. And Heliocare is really available over the counter. It's in a capsule form. They also have a Heliocare Plus that has nicotinamide. These have some nicotinamide in it. And then I also recommend, and we sell here in the clinic, a brand called Foundation Skincare. Mm-hmm. And they have one that has polypodium as well. So
wow. So sunblock from the inside out.
Kind of from the inside out, really acting as an antioxidant, not intended to replace sunscreen, but gives you a little help. And if you're really prone to skin cancer, if you've had multiple, these are the kinds of supplements I recommend for my patients all the time.
That's awesome. These would be great this time of year in the spring when I'm always outside and it's like, oh, I should have put sunscreen on.
Yeah.
Because you don't think about it because it's a cold and wet and rainy one day, and then the next day you're mowing the lawn. And
Catches you off guard.
Yep.
But we're here to talk about sunscreen today. Sunscreen is your skin's BFF.
It's, yes, your skin's bae.
Yeah, your skin's bae. So what does SPF actually mean? Take it away on that.
So SPF means sun protection factor. Mm-hmm. Now, the SPF number, what it typically can correlate to is the time that you could be out in the sun. And it's usually it's a by 10 multiplier. So what you can look in Google online is it'll say if it's an SPF 30 and you apply it, you can theoretically be out in the sun for 300 minutes. Mm-hmm. Now, we don't recommend that.
No.
We don't recommend using that metric, but if you Google it, that's what it says.
Yeah.
And so now there's different types of sunscreens. So we want to obviously protect ourselves from the sun. In dermatology, SPF, the number does matter. We don't want lower SPF. We want a little bit higher. Our typical recommendation is 30 or above. A lot of sunscreens come in the 15 or 12 range, but typically we're looking for about around 30, especially for the body if you're going to be outside in direct sunlight. A lot of facial sunscreens do come in about 15, but I usually try to shoot for the 30 or up range.
And that's the common recommendation by dermatologists, is that you should be having an SPF 30 or higher. I often err on the side of higher. A lot of my sunscreens are closer to 50 or 70. And the reason for this is real world application.
Yep.
When a sunscreen gets a rating, it has to go through independent laboratory testing after a lab or a company makes it. And they put it on the skin at a certain concentration, about 1 gram per square centimeter, which is a fair amount of sunscreen.
It's a good amount.
And then they expose the person in the test to UV light, and they see how long it takes them to burn. They give it a sunscreen rating, an SPF rating, whether that's 30, 45, 50, whatever. But in the real world, 1 gram per centimeter squared is a lot of sunscreen.
Yeah.
And most of us are not putting on that much.
We're not measuring it.
Yeah, we're not measuring it. Most days when I'm putting stuff on my face, I feel like I do a pretty good job, but it's probably one of those things like eating, I definitely was under my calorie goals today.
Yeah.
We are really good at misjudging our own health habits.
Yeah.
So my perception is probably not accurate in what I tell my patients. And, it's important to go higher because in real world circumstances, if you put on an SPF 30 and you're not putting it on at 1 gram per centimeter squared, you're not getting an SPF 30 protection out of that.
Right.
And you're probably getting, somewhere between 15 and 20. So if you err on the higher side where you're going SPF 50, SPF 70, and you do it under real world conditions, you are likely getting at least an SPF 30 out of that.
Right. And a lot of times, you want to be reapplying those types of things, but if you're applying a higher sunscreen, it'll last. It has a little bit more durability to it, unless you're really sweating or getting it wet.
Right.
So there's different types of sunscreens that we see. There's mineral and there's chemical sunscreens. Chemical sunscreens have come into quite a bit of scrutiny recently with cancer scares and things like that.
Right.
But sunscreen in general has also come in under scrutiny with all sunscreen can cause cancer. So what is the difference between a chemical and a mineral sunscreen?
So a chemical sunscreen uses, what we call organic filters. They're things like homosalate, avobenzone, oxybenzone, octinoxate. And what these do is they get in the skin. You should put them on about 30 minutes before sun exposure so they can get in that top layer of skin.
They need to absorb.
Yep. As the ultraviolet light hits the sunscreen molecules, it's converted into heat and then dissipated away from the body. So it is, protecting it from getting down deeper layers in the skin. It's converting energy from one form to another, usually as heat. Whereas mineral sunscreens are primarily going to be ingredients like zinc oxide and titanium dioxide. And it used to, everybody would think like, oh, they're minerals. They're just reflecting the ultraviolet away from the skin.
Right.
But the reality is they're also absorbing a majority of that energy and converting it to heat.
Right.
However, these things, as long as it's not a non-nano zinc, which people have some concerns over, they're perceived as being less risky. They're healthier options. And I don't necessarily agree with that in all circumstances. But if you are very sensitive to sunscreen, if you are chemical averse, zinc and titanium generally are more well recognized as being part of the health movement.
Right.
Now, I almost every day use a chemical sunscreen because they're more cosmetically elegant. In most cases, they blend in better in most cases. The one that I use quite frequently is a gel, so it's completely clear when you put it on. And it's just really, really cosmetically elegant, doesn't gunk up in facial hair. And it's really hard for companies to formulate a zinc or a titanium sunscreen that is not going to leave you with a white cast on the skin, especially if you have a darker skin type.
Yeah.
So,
or if you get sweaty or if you get wet at all, it tends to show up and now it's very apparent, or you get streaks down the face.
More people are concerned about the chemical sunscreens like running into your eyes because they will sting more.
Yeah.
And so that is, something to be aware of. And while we're kind of on the subject of the SPF level, some people are against these really high SPF levels, like 100. Yeah. And the reason is because it can give you a false sense of security. If you're not in the habit of putting it on every 2 hours, you put on an SPF 100, or I've even seen 120 coming from Japan or Korea, where you're like, I'm good all day. And you're not. You still, no matter what the SPF level is, if you want to maintain that level of protection, because it's degraded over time, you want to be reapplying every 2 hours.
Yeah. There was a study that I had read it was a long time ago now. It's probably like 8 years ago, where they were trying to see why does it seem like we're using sunscreen more frequently, but skin cancer rates are also kind of going up parallel to where how much we're using sunscreen. And they came to two conclusions. One is the patient population is different. So we're seeing the younger generation wearing sunscreen because the older generations getting more and more cancers because they were out tanning it with baby oil on. Yeah. And also it did give people a false sense of security. Going out to the beach, they put sunscreen on once and then they go in the water and then they come out and then they feel totally protected. So
I think it's a good observation because we could be dealing with two entirely different populations of people, the people wearing sunscreen and the people who didn't wear sunscreen 30 years ago. Yep. And you do tend to get skin cancer more when you're elderly. And then people that are not reapplying, they're just answering a survey. Do you wear sunscreen consistently? And they're saying yes, but they're not reapplying it. Their habits may not be accurate. And as with any time that you are taking a stats class, a statistics class, correlation is not causation. Never. We know this. So if you're concerned about sunscreen causing skin cancer, it's almost universally agreed upon by dermatologists, cosmetic chemists, and researchers that is not the case. Yep. I am always open to more information if we learn something like that, and I will gladly change my habits. However, correlation is not causation. and sunscreen, there's so many good data and studies that show it is protective against skin cancer.
100%.
So,
yeah. So let's talk about different skin types, because there's a lot of thought out there that if the darker skin type you are, the less sunscreen you may need because you have melanin, you have protection. Is that a myth, or do darker skin tones need to be wearing sunscreen?
well, it is a myth. Now, it is true that if you have more melanated skin, you do have more protection from the sun.
Yeah.
You are less likely to burn. That is the purpose of melanin in the skin, is
Yep.
to protect your DNA of your skin cells and deeper structures from ultraviolet light. So yes, you have more protection. You're less likely to burn. However, you can still experience sun damage, and highly melanated skin does not age as rapidly as white skin, but you can still get skin cancer. You can still develop things like melasma, unwanted pigmentation, seborrheic keratoses. There's all sorts of other sequelae to the skin that can result from ultraviolet light.
Right.
So I do recommend that my patients of all skin types wear sunscreen on a consistent basis, and that's where you find one that works with your skin type, that you feel confident wearing on a daily basis.
Yeah. Something that you touched on briefly is skin aging. So there's UVA and then there's UVB that come through our atmosphere. UVC usually gets absorbed as it comes through. And the UVA, typically we remember that as causes the aging of the skin, and UVB is what causes most of the time burns. Now, there's obviously overlap between the two, but that's kind of how you learn it in school.
Yeah.
UVB is the burning is what kind of causes damage to the DNA in the skin, and which is what can lead to skin cancer. Although sunscreens, you want to look for sunscreens that say broad spectrum, because most are broad spectrum nowadays. But broad spectrum sunscreens are what we recommend because it covers both UVA and UVB. And so that's what most of the chemical sunscreens are broad spectrum. The mineral sunscreens are broad spectrum.
Right. One thing I'll say on that topic also is that these chemical filters, when you look at a sunscreen and it has all the, like maybe 4 or 5 different chemical filters in it, those are all in there to cover different ranges of that UV wavelength.
Exactly.
Because one chemical may not cover all of the UVA. And the FDA is behind on this because in Europe, in Japan, in South Korea, they have many more filters that are really cosmetically elegant that provide a lot better coverage in that higher UVA spectrum.
Sure.
So there's, we have some catching up to do in the United States.
Yeah.
But that's why you see multiple different ingredients in your chemical sunscreens. And that's why zinc has to be at a high enough concentration in order to truly provide full broad spectrum coverage.
Right. I'll say something that I have noticed in chemical sunscreens is it used to be a longer list of active ingredients, and it's been slowly been cut down. I don't know if it's because there's the perception that more chemicals are bad, but yeah, that's interesting. That's an interesting fact that they're using. So you're saying they're using more ingredients, active ingredients, to cover more broad spectrum, or
not necessarily more ingredients, but some of their new chemicals just cover more on their own.
Oh, okay.
And so they're developing these filters that are replacing some of the things that we use. And then there was the reef-safe movement, ocean-safe movement that knocked out, some in certain jurisdictions, like oxybenzone is, you can't buy that in Hawaii. You can't buy a sunscreen with that in Hawaii. And then further research showed probably it's not the sunscreens damaging the reef, it's more the warming of the oceans.
Yeah.
So, however, if you can get good coverage without using as many chemicals, I'm fine with that.
Yeah. Another benefit of sunscreen is it delays aging.
It does delay aging. That's absolutely true. Some of the best evidence for this is on our older patients who use sunscreen on their face consistently, and then you see their neck. And their neck looks so much older than their face.
Always missed.
Or the face and then the back of the hands. And you look at where they're putting on sunscreen consistently. And even without sunscreen, just sun protection, you see the old farmers whose arms look like leather, and then you pull up where the shirt is, and it looks 50 years younger.
Totally.
So
common areas that we tend to miss, like you'd mentioned, the neck is a big one. The décolleté area is another big one. The tops of the ears is another big one. We see a lot of times we'll see people very, very clean looking skin, and then their ears are just covered in sunspots.
Yeah.
The scalp is another area that we tend to overlook. I've been sunburned on my scalp quite a bit.
Yeah.
So you have?
Oh yeah. I think we talked about that on our hair loss episode where I was out doing an event for my dermatology residency. And I knew that I had been losing some hair.
Yeah.
And I had sunscreen all over my face. It was a super hot day in the summer of Michigan. And I came home that night and the top of my head had been sunburned because I didn't realize how thin I had been getting.
Yeah.
And then because of the burn, I lost so much more hair. And now that I shave my head, I cover it with sunscreen every day, and I wear a hat almost every time I go outside.
Yeah.
However, when you're in that phase where you don't know that you're thinning or you're thinning, it's just hard to put sunscreen up there. And if you don't wear hats consistently, you can get burned on the top of your head. And I have done some big skin cancer surgeries on the top of men and women's heads and resolved that I would never go through that. So I always, once I started shaving my head, I always wear sunscreen on the top of my head.
It's a difficult surgery. There's not a lot of movement there. And lots of times they're hidden for a little bit before, you know, but awesome. Well, let's move on to Did You Know?
Did you know? Austin, I have a suspicion you're already going to know this, did you know? But for our listeners, did you know that window glass is excellent at blocking UVB rays, but not so good at blocking UVA rays?
So you'll age sitting next to a window.
You will age sitting next to a window. So we see this with our patients who are pilots and who are truck drivers or people who just are in the car a lot. They get more aging on the left side of their face if they're driving.
Right.
And people who work next to a window in an office or at a home office even, you are getting UVA through that window glass. And that's why we recommend sunscreen daily, even if you're working indoors next to a window.
There you go. Well, I also have a sun-related Did You Know?
Oh, I'm excited to hear it.
So 90% of aging that happens on our skin is due to the sun.
I believe it.
To sun exposure. I believe it too. I feel it.
Yeah. The other thing that I will remind patients about who are here in Idaho doing winter sports is that 90% of ultraviolet rays reflect off the snow.
Oh,
and
yeah.
so you can almost get a double dose, you know, 90% coming back up off of you. So you might be wearing a visor, but if it's coming up off the snow,
you're going to get
still
those
are getting it.
Raccoon eyes.
So, yeah. So be careful. Wear your sunscreen, summer or winter.
Yeah. And I'm finding that being here, I've lived my whole life at sea level, and here in the Treasure Valley, we're about 2,300, 2,500 feet up. I feel it.
Yeah.
It feels hotter to me here than it does, even though it's the same weather other places.
Our patients that move from Denver, where they're a mile high, they're coming with so much sun damage, just as much as our patients who grew up on the beach.
Yeah, I believe it.
It's something you do have to be careful with. Elevation, the UV is more intense. There's less atmosphere to dissipate that UV.
Yeah.
So, and there's a little Did You Know?
There you go.
When it comes to wearing sunscreen, I tell everybody online and in the clinic, the best sunscreen is the one you like to use.
Totally. The one you'll use consistently.
Consistently. So it takes a little trial and error to find that one for your daily SPF. And once you've got it, how much should you be using?
It's a great question. So the classic rule is the 2-finger rule. So you fill 2 fingers and that'll do your face. 2 fingers can do the arm. Sometimes I just do 2 for my upper arms if my shoulders are going to be exposed. But the 2-finger rule is typically what I tell people: 2 finger for the face, 2 finger for the neck, front and back. And then don't forget the ears, tops of the hands, places exposed. And you see that a lot online. When you see dermatologists online, they usually show the 2 fingers with the 2 strips on it. And then they'll apply it. And
this isn't like a tiny little thin strip on your fingers. Like you're covering most of the front of your fingers. And so I do that for my face. I do it again for my scalp. I do it again and cover the ears and the neck. And then when I'm doing my arms, I just take the bottle and I do a line all the way down my arm.
That's typically how I'll do it.
Then I rub that in. Or I'll spray. I do use spray sunscreens. I don't know if you use spray sunscreens.
Sometimes I will if I'm at the beach and it's just easier to apply it to the kids. I don't want to bring different types of sunscreens for me and the family, so we just spray everybody down. But we try to do it. So with spray sunscreens, usually chemical, you want to spray it in the shade. And let it absorb a little bit, because if you're just spraying it right onto the skin, it's already starting to absorb some of that UV, and it's not going to take full effect. And you
certainly can't spray it on and then jump right in the water. You got to let it dry on the skin. And Elta MD does have a mineral spray sunscreen, I think Sol Labs does as well. So if we can find links to those, we'll include them in the podcast show notes. But there are zinc spray sunscreens, which are really actually pretty nice.
Yeah, I've used Elta MDs and I was surprised because sometimes I've tried some in the past and they're just goopy and they don't spread well, but Elta MD did a good job.
They really did. Now, reapplication is easy as a guy because you just take more sunscreen and you put it on.
Yep.
And if you are the kind of person that wears makeup, you're worried about ruining your makeup. And
Totally.
so in these circumstances, there are spray sunscreens, there are powdered sunscreens, and I think powdered sunscreens are probably what most women would use for reapplying because they come in different shades. Color Science was kind of the leader on that, where they came with all these different shades.
Yeah.
And the biggest drawback is that you're going to run out of that powder fast if you're putting on enough.
If you're enough and reapplying.
Yeah. So, and that gets a little bit expensive, but it is important to reapply. If you're in a job, you're working outside, maybe like a real estate agent where you got makeup on and you're running from showing to showing, like that can be a good way to do it, but you just have to be mindful.
You have to be mindful. You have to reapply because it's not this perfect thing that once it's in your skin, it's in your skin. So.
Or you could take more Inner Glow vitamins.
Oh yeah, just take, how many did you take? Like 6?
Yeah, it took like 6 when I was in the pool.
Yeah.
So the sunscreen that I use every day is not necessarily the sunscreen that I use if I'm playing with my kids at the beach or at the pool or if I'm out there doing yard work.
Right.
So when I'm coming to clinic and I want an everyday sunscreen, I'm going to put on something that's really cosmetically elegant.
Yeah.
However, they're usually not water resistant because I'm not in an environment where I'm sweating a whole bunch.
Totally.
And I'm not so worried about reapplying when I'm indoors. I usually in the summer will reapply before I drive home because I know I'm going to get out and play with my kids once I get home.
Totally.
But if I'm going to go out and do yard work, if I'm going to go exercise outside, or if I'm going to the beach or the pool, I'm going to grab the highest SPF that I can. It's going to be water resistant.
Yep.
Usually water resistant for 80 minutes.
Yeah.
And I don't care if it leaves a white cast on me. I'm not trying to impress anybody.
Nope.
I just want protected from the sun.
Yeah.
So there are different sunscreen options depending on what your activities, your lifestyle are. You can be mindful of those types of things.
Totally. I get asked all the time from friends and family, do you actually wear sunscreen like you tell us to all the time? And I tell them, I see people with skin cancer every day, and I don't want that to be me.
Yeah.
So, and the way to do that is to protect. So, totally. I definitely wear different sunscreens based on what I'm doing, just like you do. Do you have a favorite for, let's say, for work?
For work, it's either going to be the Mantle Invisible Daily SPF, which unfortunately they're no longer manufacturing.
Oh, no.
So I'm just weaning down my current supply. And then if I'm going to be just out, playing with my kids or something, it's usually going to be like La Roche-Posay Anthelios that's water resistant, or Neutrogena Ultra Sheer. Right. That's water resistant. So those are kind of the ones in my rotation.
I use the La Roche-Posay one as well. I like it a lot. I actually use the EltaMD UV Recovery that we have right here because I tend to flush easily and it kind of masks the red a little bit for me. And then the EltaMD UV Sport's another great one. It's water resistant 80 minutes. And I sweat profusely, and that stuff sticks on me.
That's good.
Yeah, when I'm mountain biking or doing yard work and I'm just drenched, I don't burn. So,
do you know why sunscreens have a water resistant rating of 40 and 80 minutes only?
I don't.
So this is what I heard, and I haven't gone and verified it, but it sounds like a great story, is that they were doing these studies where they put the sunscreen on people, and they had them get in the water and swim or just be in the water.
Yeah.
And they had a timer, and it was like an egg timer, and it only went up to 40 minutes. So they turned it all the way to 40 minutes, and they got people out, and they checked them, and then they turned it another 40 minutes and had them go back in the water. So that's why it's either 40 minutes or 80 minutes.
Because the egg timer.
Because of the egg timer, and that's how the original study was done, and it's just stuck.
I hope that's the case. I
like it.
I like that story.
It's like, has anybody got a timer? Oh, I got this egg timer.
I got this egg timer. Back in the day when they just had egg timers. Now our phones or watches and everything's an egg timer.
Set a timer for 40 minutes.
Yep, totally.
We've touched briefly upon that myth that sunscreen causes cancer. You talked about the correlation, charts that have been done.
Yeah.
Another thing that came out a few years ago was this lab called Valashore. They were claiming that they were detecting benzene in many different chemical sunscreens.
A known carcinogen.
There's no safe level of benzene exposure.
Yep.
However, we are exposed to benzene all the time. From exhaust from cars, if you're sitting around a campfire, you're going to get way more benzene just sitting around a campfire than you will of applying sunscreen, every day for a year. However, those studies turned out to be pretty flawed. So they were not something that most of the companies could replicate through their own independent testing not run by the companies, but they went to try to verify this.
Yeah.
And Valisure then went and found benzene in many different benzoyl peroxide products.
Yeah.
That has been highly scrutinized as well. And Valisure they have some, skin in the game here in that they're trying to, my understanding is, develop like a Valisure seal of approval that they can put on things to make money.
Yeah.
So allegedly, I should say that because I don't know all the details.
Companies will have to pay them for their stamp of approval.
Like Eczema Association, you got to pay for that. So, but there's some potential conflicts in my understanding there, and a lot of these studies weren't something that were replicated. And so when you are hearing these different things, and we had a lot of uptick of patients that were concerned that their sunscreen was actually more harmful than benefit. And just want to reemphasize that it is certainly not true. There is far more benefit to sunscreen than risk. And myself, I'm sure you are, and every dermatologist that I know, if data comes out and proves otherwise, we'll gladly change our recommendations. We'll change our personal habits. We're not in bed with big sunscreen in any way.
Nope.
I've promoted them on social media because I believe in the product. But if I find out that the product is no longer efficacious or has more risks than benefits, I wouldn't continue to support that. So
yeah. That's whenever the C word is dropped, the big cancer, people tend to. It's good to err on the side of caution for a little while, but then wait for the truth to reveal itself, the studies to come out. So it's kind of it's sad that had to happen where the studies were just could be replicated and that it's kind of being debunked. But we have good alternatives today, though.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's wrap up with a little product of the week. The product of the week that I want to feature today is Elta MD UV Clear. Yeah. UV Clear was the first Elta MD product that I ever tried. It's the OG, and it is still one of my favorites to this day.
Yeah.
The link that we're going to be sharing in the podcast show notes and on the YouTube video is going to be to the Air Skin Store. At the Air Skin Store, you can get 15% off your purchase of Elta MD, and you will continue to get discounts for the life of your account. You don't have to pay to become, a subscriber to the Air Skin Store, but you'll get discounts on Elta MD products and many other skincare brands, and you always get that discount on recommendations that are curated by me or by Austin.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. So go check out that link, and you can see our personal recommendations on there.
Guys, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Skinfluence podcast. You can find me on all social media platforms at Dr. Dustin Portela.
And you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Austin Lee PAC. And we'll see you next time.
We'll see you.